Good evening and welcome to the third of these four musical theatre masterclasses. We're chatting with some of the big stars of the West End about musical theatre. So a very welcome to all EYT members and also our partner organisations. And I know there are some in England, some in The Hague, all over the place. So it's really good to have you with us this evening. My thanks, as ever, are to my producers, to Jake and Glenn, who are doing all the technical wizardry, because, of course, I'm a total dinosaur. But if you remember a couple of weeks ago, I talked with Liz Robertson, and we talked really about what's sometimes called the golden age of musical theatre, which you date from about 1928, the show Showboat. Do look it up. It's a great show. It's got some really great songs in it, and some more period songs that perhaps, as Rosie was saying last week, choose unusual songs for auditions. So have a look at some of those older shows because they're not so well known. And we talked last week about how that golden age sort of came to an end largely because the rise of pop music separated show music from the sort of music that young people particularly listen to pop music. But there were two people who particularly changed the course of musical theatre, really, by reuniting that pop sensibility with a musical theatre sensibility. Now, one of those was Andrew Lloyd Webber. And we talked with Rosie last week, Rosie Ash, about Phantom of the Opera. Andrew's written so many shows, perhaps the most famous of which is Cats. And one of my guests this evening has actually played Grisabella, the lead character in Cats. And we might talk about that a little bit in a while. And we also talked about Andrew Lloyd Webber's breakout hit, Jesus Christ Superstar. And another Jesus-based musical also at roughly the same time, around about the 1970s, again, united a musical theatre sensibility with a pop sensibility. And that show was a show called Godspell. Again, if you haven't heard of it, look it up, download the soundtrack from Spotify, Godspell. It's a great show. And Godspell was written by somebody called Stephen Schwartz. And Stephen Schwartz has had an extraordinary career, some amazing hits, one or two amazing flops as well. One of the most popular flops of all time. It never seems to actually work, but it has the most beautiful score, a show called The Baker's Wife. But Stephen Schwartz wrote a musical that has become one of the biggest hits in the world. It plays all over the world. It opened on Broadway and it came to the West End. My two guests this evening have both been deeply involved in Wicked. They've done numerous shows and we will talk about their extraordinary careers, but they've both been involved with Wicked, though not, it has to be said, at the same time. Kerry Ellis played Elphaba in Wicked. Welcome, Kerry. Do come online. And I think I'm right in saying, Kerry, that you played Elphaba for longer than anybody else. Is that right?
I don't know is the answer. I mean, I was the first British girl to play it in London, the first British girl to go green. And I did it in London for about a year, and then I went to Broadway for 6 months, and then I came back to London for a further 6 months, and then I came out of the show for about 5 years, I think, and then I went back in for a little stint of about 4 months, I think it was. So I don't know if I'm the longest reigning, but I definitely did my time.
And sadly, you my other guest this evening didn't play when you were playing Elphaba, but has played because he has played in the orchestra of Wicked. One of the most extraordinary, wonderful things about musical theatre, of course, is you have this amazing live orchestra. And my second guest this evening is Toby Coles. Toby, come into the room. Hi, Tobes. And Toby is the most brilliant trumpeter. Some of you know that my day job is to run the Actors Church, and Toby is my go-to trumpeter. When I want a wonderful fanfare fun event, Toby comes and plays for me. But Toby, you also played in the pit band for Wicked. For how long did you do Wicked for?
Well, I'm still doing it, apparently, even though we've had a bit of a hiatus. It's still my job, I think, hopefully. But this will be, it'll be 5 years in next January.
Wow.
That's a strange way of looking at it. So, yeah.
Well, that's one of the questions. I kind of want to ask you the obvious question, Kerry, firstly, about the green. How long does the makeup take? And do you find that you are permanently basically green when you're playing Elphaba?
Well, I mean, I permanently had a green tinge because I think I was the first blonde to play the role, and the makeup goes right up into your hairline. So of course, because I was so blonde, you could just see this tinge that I kind of adopted, which was lovely. It didn't take too long. I think once you've been in the show a little while, they get it down to about 20 minutes, half an hour maybe.
And are you sprayed on? Is it sprayed on?
No, it's like
it's actually painted.
It's like a poster paint, so it's just a normal MAC base.
Right.
Bit of water, paint it on, bit of powder, and off you go.
Wonderful. And so a question to both of you, really. How do you do such a long run? How do you keep it fresh when it's a show that you're in perhaps for a year, or for Tobes for 5 years? How do you keep that live quality when you're doing it for so long?
Well, I think it's probably different. It's probably different for a musician than it is for an absolute world-class performer like Kerry. So why didn't you go first, Kerry, and give your take on it, and then I'll talk about the techniques musicians use.
Well, for me, I mean, I don't tend to stay in anything longer than a year. Wicked was a bit of an exception because of the transfer. Because I like, a year is good. You get enough time to really, get the character in and get to really own the role, and then you get to live it for a little bit, and then after about a year, for me, it's usually time to move on and to try something new. For me, it's never really, it doesn't get repetitive or boring because it's always different. There's always different entities. You may have a cover on, you may have, there may something happen during the performance, and it's how you navigate around that. The audiences are always different. How you feel is different. We're only human. Sometimes we feel amazing, sometimes we don't. So for me, there's always variants that are different, which I enjoy. I like that things don't always go to plan. I like that it's live. You never quite know what's going to happen. Even when it's something very familiar to yourself, things can go wrong or things can change, and that's what theatre is all about. And also, I think as a when you play a character, you have that responsibility that people are paying 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 pounds a ticket, and it's their first time. Could be their first time, it could be their 20th time of coming to see the show, and that's your job and your responsibility to make it special for them. It's why we do it. We tell stories, we create stories, and also I think you play it differently every day. You're going to feel something different on a Monday than you're going to feel it on a Friday, so it's always slightly different. So for me, it's not a problem. If I was in for something for a long time, then maybe it would be, but yeah, I think people try and move on as much as possible.
So Toby, from the musician's point of view, how do you navigate a long run like that? I can't remember with the staging of Wicked, although God knows I've seen it enough times. Are you actually in the pit, or are you sometimes, just to explain to people, sometimes if shows are very complicated, they don't nowadays put orchestras in the orchestra pit. They're sometimes in a box somewhere else and it's all mic'd.
Yep.
But where were you for Wicked? Are you in the pit?
They are. It's a 17-piece band, and you're in the orchestra pit. Everyone is in there, which is really nice, because, as you say, very sometimes, increasingly so, with sound engineers, they want to isolate every single instrument so they can have utter control over the sound. And I've done shows where you're in a porter cabin at the back of the theatre. And it can be very odd.
If you move your head, Toby, you can just show people your Matilda poster, because you did Matilda and you weren't in a pit at all for Matilda.
No, it was bizarre. We were under the stage, and then each section of the band, it was only about a 9-piece band, and we were all isolated off. And inside the box, the brass were then inside another box. So it's like playing inside a large phone box. And, certain nights, after a large curry between shows, it was, not always ideal performing standards. Anyway, what my point is, to go back to your original question, I think it's very different for a musician to that of a performer. I am married to a performer, and I don't know. I'm in awe of the job that the people on stage do, like Kerry, because some days you do feel duff, and some days you do feel you've got no energy, or you might have been working, especially as a musician. You might have been working during the day. You might be tired. You might have been spending the whole day teaching, and you are expected, unlike Kerry, where she enjoys it being different and changing on a nightly basis, and that actually gives her energy. Very often as a musician, your requirement is to make it exactly the same every night. That is the demand, and that is the demand that's placed on you by the MD, the conductor, and it has to, if you put some extra spin on a phrase, or you play a bit loudly, or you are told by the, I don't like that, cut that out. Some MDs are like that, not all. But your requirement is to make it exactly the same, in order for the people on stage to be able to have the freedom to perhaps, they need that rock so that they know exactly what's happening rhythmically and musically. I mean, it can change on a nightly basis. You get some conductors that take things at a really fast speed suddenly, or slow, and the actors and people will say, "Oh my God, that was a nightmare tonight. It was why is it taking so long? It was exhausting." And then you get some people that take things at breakneck speed, and it's a nightmare for them. But
I think next week Harriet Thorpe, she did Mame, and she said that if there was a little bit of sort of a row going on, the MD would take some of the dances a bit faster, and they would like,
yeah.
Oh my gosh!
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
as next stage manager, of course, I like it to be absolutely identical, because then I feel I know exactly what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and I feel very confident. And so it is that balance, I think, to say to the students, between the creativity that you were talking about, Kerry, and yet that rock solid core of your technique, of your professionalism, of knowing that you've got to tell the story that starts there and finishes there, and so
in order, just to answer your question,
yeah.
I've waffled on and not actually answered your question. You're to deal with a long run, because musicians, unlike the cast who, as Kerry said, move on, they might do 12 months, and then they've got their career is beholden to the shows that are available to them for sometimes a relatively short period of time. Especially if you are primarily a dancer, you have a window for your career that you're not going to be doing it when you're 50, 60. Well, there are, but it's very rare. So you're beholden to the productions that come. So they need to move on to another production to further their career. But a musician, obviously, we don't have to be there 8 shows a week. We are able to put in a deputy to do a show when we go and do something else. So we don't have that 8 shows a week mentality, which obviously helps when you go and do the show. You're not stale and you're not bored of it, and hopefully it's still you're playing an instrument that hopefully you love, and just the physical act of playing your instrument enables you to do it right, and respect for yourself and the people around you gives you the energy to try and make it right night after night. That's the difference, really. It's your own, it's the opinion of your colleagues and the people around you that spur you on to do it night after night. And for a musician, a long-running show it's a godsend, because it's such a fun, especially as so many areas of work are getting smaller. A nightly gig, a show, is a phenomenal privilege and a great thing to have. So it's not difficult to motivate yourself when you realize how many people would be desperate to do it if you weren't there.
Can I just say, one of the reasons we're doing these masterclasses is, as you all know, the theatre industry is going through an absolutely dreadful period because everything is shut. We are raising money for through these classes for Acting for Others. So if you, or perhaps more likely your parents, are able to make a contribution to Acting for Others, we really would be very grateful. I know it's very tough for many people. If you can't do it, that's fine. But if you can make a contribution, just Google Acting for Others, because it really is helping the profession, because practically everyone's out of work at the moment. I want to go back a little bit, guys, and talk about, because obviously we've got these young people just starting out. And I want to talk a little bit about your training, about your breaks, about how you would approach auditions. Again, getting a little bit of perspective. And then I want to talk, and I particularly want you two to talk to each other a little bit about the relationship between a muso in the pit, an MD, and a performer on stage. But can we just go back a little bit to Kerry, with you first, how you got started and kind of, and what made you want to do this bloody awful job?
It's a brilliant job, and you know what? It's been highlighted how brilliant our industry and our jobs are through this past year, because I think we can get a little bit blasé about it, and to not have that opportunity, or to not have that that gig to go to, that show to go to, that performance to do, has been really difficult. And I think it's going to make us all value every second, even if we didn't before, which most of us did. I think it's going to make us just soak up every second and every moment. For me, there was never really a question. There was never the defining moment of, oh, now I'm going to be a performer. I just always was going to do it. I loved it as a child. I grew up just at a local dance drama school, and the progression for me was just natural to go to drama school. I think that I would have given up school if I could have done, and gone and just done it full time if it was an option, because I just had this strong passion and this drive to perform and sing and have music around me and move and connect with people and tell stories. And I was fortunate that I had support from my family to go to drama school early. I went at 16, and you
went to Lane, didn't you?
I did. And
of course, Betty Lane is a phenomenon. I mean, she really is extraordinary.
She's amazing. She's still running the college. She's in her 80s. She's still, flying the flag, and the school's amazing. But there's lots of great schools out there as well.
There's Sylvia Young, of course, Italia Conti. I mean, they're all, I mean, it's interesting because I've asked everybody else, but it is really interesting to say that without exception, all my guests have said, get yourself a proper professional training, that you absolutely need that if you're going to succeed in this business.
Yeah, there's lots of different ways of training now, though. I think there's not, like, when I was auditioning for colleges, there was the big kind of 5 or 6 colleges that most people would go into, and that was kind of it. Now there's so many different courses. There's summer schools, there's year-long apprenticeship kind of things. There's so many options and opportunity for different people because drama school's not for everybody. And financially, you know, it's expensive to go unless you can get the support. And I mean, I was lucky, I got a grant and I got sponsored from the council. You know, I was very fortunate back then, but there's not that support now. So you have to work with what you can get and what's right for you. And I think as long as you have some kind of training, and then a lot of it is training on the job. You learn on the job, you learn working with other people. I mean, I think I still learn on jobs now. I walk into something and I don't know everything. I'm going to learn by working with other people. So yes, training's important, but it's the right training for you, I think.
Thanks. And Tobes, where did you train?
I can answer that very quickly, or give you a more cerebral answer. I went to music college after leaving school. I went to the Royal Academy of Music, but that was a very classical orchestral. You were either going to be principal trumpet of a symphony orchestra or a worldwide international soloist, and neither of those things particularly I knew that neither of those parts were for me. I'd always played like in big bands and jazz bands and pop bands and salsa bands and commitments, tribute bands, and I didn't want to be in a symphony orchestra. I didn't go home and listen to Mahler and Strauss and these symphonies that other people would spend hours and hours talking about. And I
have to tell you this, Kerry, and I'm going to tell all the students as well. Toby Coles, I think, has on his phone every version of the Overture to Gypsy that's ever been recorded. So, and he has played them all. So, again, if you don't know the Overture to Gypsy, it's probably the greatest overture ever written. And
I can't believe you just outed my Gypsy fascination.
I'm afraid I have just outed your Gypsy fascination. Yeah.
Wow.
And of course, it's
violated.
Great trumpet obbligato in that, hasn't it? I mean, just fabulous.
Yeah, it's awesome. And there's so much great music from musical theatre. And the thing is, all those recordings from the 1940s, 50s and 60s, the people on those recordings, they were the absolute cream of the crop when it came to, and they weren't doing it with editing and incredible logic, sampling and auto-tune. They were and they were doing it after the show. When they did those cast albums, they would go and record them at 2 or 3, 4 o'clock in the morning after opening night. I mean, you listen to those early recordings of Gypsy or Mame, it's staggering playing. But I remember listening to, on Saturday afternoons where they used to always play musicals on the TV when I was growing up, the standard of playing in those movies like Singing in the Rain and Kiss Me Kate and all those old plays, the playing is phenomenal, and that's what turned me on to it, really. And like Kerry, I never really had another option. I was a chorister in a cathedral choir, and then I played the trumpet. I saw Wynton Marsalis do a concert when I was about 14, and he just blew my mind. I'd never seen anyone so cool in my life. And I thought, well, that's
that then.
That's it.
Yeah. Oh, you've gone muted. Kerry, we'll come back to
the department.
Oh, there you are. You're back. You went.
Sorry. I think someone was trying. When I was at music college, there was a music theatre department, and you would just sign up to be in the orchestra, and everyone else wanted to play Shostakovich and Schnittke and stuff. And me and a mate of mine, we said, no, we'll do the music theatre. Get to hang out with attractive people. Get to play good music.
Well, it is true, of course, that actors are generally just prettier than the rest of us. Now, I want to talk Wicked, because Wicked is such a phenomenon. It's such a huge show, and it's just become this juggernaut. And obviously the score, Kerry, has become so popular and so loved. You have some big sings as Elphaba. what's the hardest number in the score to sing, and is it that number, or is it another number that kind of, you know, gets you out of bed in the morning and think, wow, I'm going to sing this tonight, or twice on Saturdays?
Yeah. I mean, the show is a drive to get you there. You know, it's a real mixed bag, because it's daunting in one sense, but thrilling in another. And if you're on form and you're up for it, it's like nothing else. You know, the journey is unbelievable. The music, the physicality, the emotion, the reaction, it is like nothing else. However, it can also be quite a demon, because if you're not feeling great, or you've done 7 shows and you've got to push through that last one, it can be really difficult. It's so demanding. And because it's so diverse, you have a lot of singing, but you also have a lot of shouting and a lot of running around, and it's emotional. And to sing those big songs that people are waiting for, you do
Yes.
feel that expectation, and you people are waiting for everyone to go, you know, they're waiting for it.
And the end of Defying Gravity, of course, is such an iconic moment, both physically, the lighting, and of course you belting out whatever that top note is, but it's up there somewhere.
Yeah, and you know people are waiting for it, and also you know that it's the climax of Act 1, but you also know what else you have to sing and what else you've got to get through. So it's a challenge, but it's an amazing challenge, and the reward and the response that you get is
2 weeks ago, we were talking to Liz Robertson, who of course famously played Eliza in Cameron's My Fair Lady, and she was talking about the kind of the sheer scale of the role. And you also have played Eliza, haven't you? And again, it's an enormous journey to go on. And Liz was talking about, you know, there's so much on the chest, you know, and then you've got the pure, almost operatic, I could have danced all night.
Oh, it's mental. And Wicked is like that, because, you know, you can be belting and doing Gravity and No Good Deed, and then you've got to flip up and do a really kind of soft mix for Good. Well, I had nothing by For Good, because I'm just not that kind of singer, so I would find that really difficult. But yeah, I mean, My Fair Lady is exactly the same. You have all of that, you know, words, I'm just sick. And then you've got to go, I could have danced on it, and you're right up there, and it's like insane for somebody to do all of that in one show, and then to do it, you know, consecutively for the rest of the week is
what always terrifies me, I think, when one reads back, and you were saying, Tobes, about recording the cast album with really very little help. But when you think when Julie Andrews and Rex Harrison did My Fair Lady, they didn't have radio mics. I mean, there were some microphones, but nothing like what we've got now. So poor old Julie Andrews was having to sing that 8 times a week without the sort of technical support you've got nowadays, which must have been awesome.
I also think, though, that musicals are written differently now. So something like My Fair Lady, there's space in the orchestration for the voice. There's moments where it pulls back, or it becomes delicate, or there are different instruments. There's space for it. And nowadays, things like Wicked are written with huge orchestra sounds and big noises that you can't compete with. You can't sing over that, so you need to be amplified. It's just they're written differently, and that's just how the style of music is now. I think it's written that you couldn't sing it without a microphone.
That's right. The sound design now is dealing, you know, in Wicked there are 4 keyboards that are basically computers. And they create a huge array of sounds, not just inside the band, but they're doing sound effects, they're doing instruments that aren't actually in the orchestra. They're massive computers. And when you talk about My Fair Lady, the band wouldn't have been mic'd up, and so and in fact, Gypsy, apparently, you know, when you talk about that, in the original production, they had the 3 trumpet players on stools, so they would be higher than the rest of the orchestra, so their sound could carry, because it was such an integral part to the score, and, you know, a sort of returning theme.
Whereas now you just turn the knob up a bit.
Quite.
And what's
so
it like,
sound
Toby,
design has changed.
to as it were, to be there to obviously to perform the score, but also to support the actors, to support the performers. What's that like? What's that feel like?
I don't think your job is a bit of a, you are there to do what you're told by the MD. They might have someone who's doing their first show. They might have someone who is louder, and more able than anyone else, or they might have someone who likes to take this song slower. You are there to be a minion. There are some shows where there's room for personality, but as I said before, that's it. When you come to doing a show, it's not your job to be the star, and it makes it sound like I'm doing our job down, but it's just not the job. You are there to be consistent, and that's what actually makes you get booked again and again on different shows, is your consistency and your ability to adapt to the music, different styles. I have sympathy because so many musicals now have their sort of pastiche. They reference different styles of music. They're sort of taking the mickey or out of different styles. And your job is there to understand that and to deliver what the person waving the stick is asking for. And sometimes what they're asking for is unreasonable, and you can gently suggest that what they're doing is wrong. And I have been there, and that's that's a whole different scenario when you're met with someone that actually doesn't know what they're doing, and they're telling you what to do, and you're there, well, I can't do that because you're incompetent. But that's a whole other situation.
So, Kerry, so what's it like singing? So many people, particularly auditions and so on, are singing with backing tracks, and of course, we're all doing, backing tracks at the moment. Although I'm amazed at some of the stuff that's being produced. I mean, it's extraordinary. But what's it like singing with a full-blown West End band?
Oh, I mean, there's nothing like it. There really isn't. And I've been very fortunate to spend, the majority of my career doing that. And you realise how lucky we are. It's amazing. Like, when everything works and everything kind of clicks, and you can feel it as well some nights. I mean, when everything's happening and there's an adrenaline and everything is just happening at the same time, it's amazing because there's a lot of people to be on that same wavelength. But when it does happen, it's like nothing else. And like Toby was touched on, if people don't work together, if they don't click, there can be a real divide sometimes between what's going on stage and underneath, the MD and what's going on stage. If that doesn't work, that doesn't click, the show doesn't work. It falls apart and there's a fight. It all has to be collaborative. The sound, the lighting, the dressers, the residents, everybody has to work together to make the show work and to make the show be the best that it can be.
Which is interesting because that segues into a question that's just come in on my chat feed. And it's a question, I think, to you, Kerry, but it says, well, both of you really, but it says, do you ever mess up when you're acting? And if you do, how do you still make it wonderful and amazing? So does it ever go wrong?
Of course it always goes wrong. We're human. It's the beauty of live theatre. It goes wrong. People love it when it goes wrong. Audiences love it when something happens because they can go, I was there then. Yeah. I mean, I still remember going to see Miss Saigon, and I got to see Lea Salonga, and I remember the little Tam sneezing in her face, and she laughed and the whole audience laughed, and I still remember that. It was a moment. And people love it.
It is true. It is true. You do remember. I always remember I went to see a production with the gorgeous Jane Lapater playing Edith Piaf. And she played it with a Cockney accent. And suddenly, and she was doing this weird thing like this all through the first 5 minutes. I thought, what is this, some sort of Piaf mannerism? If it is, it's not working. And then suddenly this incredibly cultured voice came out and said, I'm terribly sorry, we're going to have to stop because you got a nosebleed. And the audience were incredibly sympathetic, but obviously she carried on. But yeah, so go on, tell us a night when something went horribly wrong on Wicked.
I mean, there's lots. There's lots. I mean, it's always you know, when the big things don't work, because people come to see you fly. People, you know, you go to Chitty to see the car fly. You go to Poppins to see to see Mary fly. When things, or like the bubble, you know, if things don't happen, if those magical moments don't happen, I feel that's tough for the audience, because they're like, however, what it does do is when those things do happen, again, there's like an energy rush that rushes through the building, and suddenly everybody elevates and something happens. And
Scarlett Strallan's, when she was doing Mary Poppins on Broadway, apparently the fly quite often broke down, and she had a sort of whole little repertoire of gags with the audience. I'm stuck here again, you know. So it was just like, you know,
the
terrible.
Chitty thing. I mean, I did Chitty. That was for 3.5 years. And the second night we opened, and the next night they cancelled the show because the car didn't fly. They'd broken it, and it was awful. But it used to regularly happen. And but on that, also on that show, one of the funniest moments, there was a scene when the doll box. What do you use? I can't remember, doll on the box number. So the toy maker, who's this fabulous Shakespearean actor, used to have to say, you know, here is the toy, and there was a fanfare from the brass. And when you're doing a long running show, this was in the day before iPads, and in the days before everyone had mobile phones and stuff. And so you're reading your book, and you've got an ear going out, because you know when you've got to play, you know how the show's going, and we're all reading our books, and the scene's going on. We know what the fanfare is, and suddenly the second trombonist started playing, and you know, a second trombone part to a fanfare isn't that exciting. Sort of bum bum ba 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 bum bum ba, and we all dropped our books and grabbed our instruments and started playing, and it was a total car crash. And the conductor stopped it, and Brian Blessed, who was playing Baron Bombast, leant down, looked into the pit, and he said, "I think the town band have been drinking again." and the audience lost it. The conductor, who had started the fanfare in the wrong place, didn't realise, said, "We'll try that again, shall we?" Angry at us because he thought it was our fault. So we tried to play it again, and we knew that it was the wrong place. So we were now crying with laughter, couldn't play. It was a write-off the second time. He then delivered the correct line, so we had to play it a third time, but couldn't get through it. It was a total and utter car crash, but the audience were in hysterics.
Of course, yes. I mean, I have to say, I saw a performance of Phantom of the Opera when the chandelier went up. That great, you know, it never did come back down again. It just got stuck, and that was the end of that.
Yeah.
You know? Okay, we've got some live questions. So we're going to bring some live people in. I don't know what the questions are, but I do know who's coming in first, and that's Leonie. So Leonie, come into the room. I'm sure Jake will make that happen. Hopefully. If not, it's a car crash. Here we go. There we are. Hi, Leonie. Welcome to our class, and your question, please.
Apart from performing skills, what other skills are worth developing for a career in performance?
Can you say that again? There was a little bit of distortion on the line. Can you say that again?
Apart from performing skills, what other skills are worth developing for a career in performance?
Okay, so what other skills would you say? I mean, the people talk about triple threat, which is the ability to sing, dance, and act, even quadruple threat now, because they're trying to put musicians out of business by making actors play musicians. But what would you say are the other kind of key skills, Kerry, that you kind of need?
Well, I an interesting skill to have, which I don't think, you know, drama schools particularly cover, is things like, well, now I think there's a couple of things like business skills. So, you know, starting yourself up with how to sort your tax out, how to, you know, what the relationship you're going to have with your agent, you know, with money and those kind of things. And because we're not taught that, we're not told, you know, oh, suddenly you're going to have to be self-employed and what that actually means. You know, I think those skills you learn along the way, but if you were given a little heads up at college, it would make it a lot smoother. And I also think now, because we're in such a mode of social media, I think a bit of social media skills, like a bit of media, because we all have to use it. It's part of our industry. It's a way that we can connect. It's the way that we can communicate with other artists, with other performers, with other musicians, with other creatives. And it's a great tool. And I think having a few skills in that, even if they're basic skills, would be really helpful. And, you know, I think a lot of us are learning on the job now, especially now, because it is our way of communicating. But I think a few more skills in that for me would have massively helped.
Toby, anything you wanted to add to that?
No, not really. I think the journey for a musician is very different to that of someone performing on stage. I don't know if Leonie wants to know about playing a musical instrument, but it's such a different thing for a performer on stage. The role of an agent and making correct decisions about your career is, for a musician, you spend your time sort of developing a foundation of work, regular work, and if you get a show, it might be the only one you ever do. So and then there are people that seem to go from show to show to show. There's no path that is dictated or that you use to,
which I think I would say from the other guests other weeks is I think that, you know, watching the profession very closely, but from the outside, as it were, is I think you have to be incredibly tough. I think you have to have an incredibly tough hide.
You do, but the important thing is to be adaptable and to be able to not sort of say, I am this and I will only do this. You have to be able to, and I think it's true for, I mean, Kerry can say whether this is true or not, but I would imagine it's similar. You have to be able to say, I can do that, but you have to back that up with actual knowledge of different styles, different techniques, you know, and be aware of the different, you know, if someone says to you, right, we want you to play this in a country style, you can't say, well, actually, I only do rock and roll, so you know, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do it. Because you have to go, yeah, that's fine, do your research, learn how to do it, and be adaptable. But the ability to get, for a musician point of view, you are going to be employed because people want to sit next to you or have you around.
Yeah.
It's taken for granted that you're good enough on your instrument.
Yeah.
If you're not good enough on your instrument or performing, you won't work. So it doesn't really matter. So the thing that's going to get you work is your ability to, or the desire of people to want you around, because of the environment that you create through your personality, and you put people in a different place by being there. If you're a nightmare to be with, if you're a diva, if you're horrible to work with, if you think that you're the most important person in the room, then it's game over. And those people exist, but they don't last very long.
No, they don't, because it's actually a very small industry, and in the end, everyone knows everybody. Right. Thank you very much for your question, Leonie. We're going to go next to Ishika. Ishika, let's have your question for Kerry and Tobe.
I'm sorry, my camera.
Hi, Ishika. Welcome. Let's have your question.
Right. I've been told before that if you make your passion into your job, after a while, the passion kind of starts to dwindle and it becomes more like work. I was wondering how you guys keep loving what you do, despite, you know, things getting hard sometimes.
Okay, Kerry, do you want to go first on that? I think you show your passion all the time, actually. So
yeah, for me, I think it's a job that you have to love, because it can be tough. You have to be pretty resilient. We're being judged all the time. It's a personal thing. You get told no a lot, and you have to be pretty resilient. So therefore, you have to love it. You have to want to do it, because that's what will drive you to sustain a career. If you don't love it, find something else.
Yes.
Too difficult, and there will be every excuse to knock you off or to not do it. And your passion and your drive is what will get you through.
Thank you. We're going to go next to Tilly. Thank you very much, Ishka. Tilly. Oh, well, later. So has there ever been a moment, Kerry, it's just a question that's come in on the chat, where you felt, actually, I can't do it tonight, or do you just push through?
Well, they call it Dr. Theatre. They call it Dr. Theatre for a reason. Yeah. There are moments when you are exhausted, or you're injured, or you've had terrible news, or it's life. Life goes on, and there are moments when you're going to find it difficult. But there is something about, you hear that orchestra start and you hear that overture and something clicks, and you see the audience, you feel, you buzz off everybody else's energy as well, and you just go. And it's like a train, once you get on it, you're not getting off, and something just happens, and that adrenaline and that rush and being stood in front of people will do that. You don't want to stand in front of tons of people and not be committed, not give it your all. So that's what I think keeps you going.
Tilly, welcome. What's your question?
Hi, I was wondering what kind of traits you value in a young actor, and what kind of things make them stand out?
Good. Yes, good. For me, so for instance, if I was doing a show and say a young cover went on, I would want them to be, like Toby was saying, consistent. You want them to come and do the job. You want somebody to come and do what is expected, but also you want somebody to have a bit of life in them as well, and a bit of their own drive and something interesting. But a little bit like Toby was saying earlier, it's about being a nice person. Be kind, be someone that people want to work with, because that's what's important. We're an unconventional family that have to get together and create something, and if you don't play your part, if you don't do your job, it just doesn't work. So you've got to kind of turn up, do your job, be nice, and be yourself as well. Bring a bit of something individual. But
it is extraordinary how I did tell this story last week, but I think I went to see, just before it all closed down, dress rehearsal of Six, which is a one-set musical, 6 fabulously talented women on stage, but by musical standards, quite a small show. And yet, because it was dress rehearsal, there were 14 production desks in the stalls, plus band. And just the sheer number of people who have to work on a show. Be nice, as Toby said. Do you want to add anything on that, Toby?
Well, only that you are there. From a musician's point of view, I think the thing that is going to stand you in good stead is your willingness and desire to learn. Anyone that shows up thinking that they know everything because they're going, as Kerry said, someone might be going on as a cover, and they rock up and going, right, this is my opportunity. You're going to find out how this is supposed to be done. I am here. I have arrived. It's game over.
That's a no-no.
It's game over, because and it happens in the orchestra. You get people turning up, and they take on the overcoat of world weariness in order to try and project this professionalism. I'm so over this. I'm so bored of this because I'm so better than this. And you get musicians coming in, and I'm sure it exists I know it exists in the actors upstage, But you get musicians that will come into a show and they'll go, oh God, have I really got to do this? And you think, well, no, you don't actually. And actually you're annoying me by making me feel like this is beneath you. So if you can show up with the idea, you go, well, I can use this as an opportunity to see how good I can be, and use this opportunity to learn from the people around you, and so and have the humility to go, wow, that person is incredible, and I can learn from them, and take every opportunity to learn from other people. And when people see you as someone that goes, I want to learn, that sounds fantastic, that is the main attribute that you can bring to any performing situation, where you are into other people and they feel like you are someone that they can interact with and help.
Thank you very much. That's really good advice. Thank you very much. We're going to have Anna from my old hometown of Southampton. So Anna, welcome again. It's good to have you with us again. Poor old Mayflower Theatre in Southampton still shut, of course, as are all 43 West End shows. It's terrible in central London. I can't tell you how depressing it is at the moment. It's just awful. Anna, your question.
So yesterday our lecturer touched on a particular subject on performance anxiety, which is something that I thought was quite unusual in university, and then you realise it's something that it's quite fairly normal. So my question really is, I wrote get over, but I think that's the wrong word. How do you deal with performance anxiety? And just a quick comment, Toby, your story about Chitty just made me laugh so much, and I cackled really loudly. So glad that no one heard me. But yeah, that's my question.
Kerry.
Performance anxiety, I mean, I'll let Kerry go second to give you probably a far more important and a detailed answer. But I don't think it. I remember a lecture at music college where someone asked that very same question, and the guy just, well, who doesn't have performance anxiety? And everyone in the room put their hand up. It's as simple as that. It's not something that isn't supposed to be there. We all have, as performers, you spend your whole life saying, you know, even if you're practicing an instrument or practicing a voice or practicing, you're constantly asking yourself, was I any good? Is that any good? And especially now, at the risk of sounding like an old man, your generation have so much self-analysis going on through social media, Instagram, this need, and Facebook, this need for, am I any good? Am I liked? Am I any good? This constant need for approval, and it's relentless. So I imagine the performance anxiety that you experience is far more than, I mean, Kerry's, what, 25 now, 26? But when 20 years ago, it was just, when you're performing, you go out and say, I'm not sure about this. I'm not sure I can play this piece. It's a little bit beyond me. And sometimes it goes horribly wrong. And I've been there, and I've played trumpet concerto where no sound, with a symphony orchestra behind me, no sound comes out the end of your instrument. And you have to remember that no one really cares. No one cares. And you get off and you go, well, that didn't go very well, did it? You go, no, not really. Oh well.
See you tomorrow.
I'll try and be better tomorrow. Yeah. And the older you get, the less performance anxiety. You realize that there are more important things going on in the world. And that sounds like a patronizing answer to an important question, but performing is a muscle. And the more you use the muscle, the stronger it gets. And the more you do it, the more performing you can do, which is it's a horrible thing to say in this time we're living in, because no one is performing. But it is a muscle, And when you get to do it over and over and over and over again, your anxiety about doing it will leave you.
Kerry, is there anything you want to add?
Toby's got it, you know.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. And I think a lot of it is mindset, because if you can talk your way in and out of things, you know, you can talk.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
I think it's very interesting that this come up other weeks, and you know, it's not about it not being there, it's about how you use it.
Yeah.
You know, because it's nervous energy, and if you can use the energy, then that's good. Thank you so much, Anna, for your question. Believe it or not, we're coming to the end of our time together. It's gone so quickly. I really wanted to talk. For those of you who don't know, Kerry has formed an amazing professional relationship with Brian May, the guitarist from the band Queen, one of the greatest bands of all time. And I really wanted to talk about that, but we're kind of running out of time. So it's a real shame, but maybe just something, just tell us just one little thing about what it's like to perform with someone like Brian. I mean, I've watched you and Brian have performed in my church, which was, you know, fairly mind-blowing in itself. So I've watched you two perform together. And you do have a great rapport. And I just wonder it as a kind of just something to share with our students as we've actually got you here.
I mean, yeah, Brian's been hugely instrumental in my life. You know, I actually met Brian when I was doing My Fair Lady, when I did my first West End show. So that relationship formed very early, because I almost had this kind of parallel careers going on. You know, my theatre was going from strength to strength, but then suddenly I was getting introduced to music and to how to be in a studio and how to create an album, and then how to perform as myself, and that was developing alongside. So Brian's been massive in my life. He's part of our family now. You know, my kids have grown up, you know, on tour with him. I was pregnant, and then when I had them, they came on the tour buses with us, and it's been hugely instrumental and amazing, and I'm incredibly grateful. I think the reason we work well, especially now, you know, in the earlier days we were discovering and figuring out where I would sit, what kind of music I would make, whereas now it's very collaborative. I think what Brian gives to me is the freedom to express myself through music and try different things, and he gives me a platform. And what I think I give to Brian is a way to express himself, which isn't Queen. It isn't that expectation of him coming along and playing the riffs that we all know and love and have grown up listening. What we do together is something very different, and it allows him to be Brian May. It's not Brian May from Queen, you know, it allows him to be himself. And we've discovered this neutral ground where we discover all kinds of music. It can be very simple with just him and myself, a guitar and a voice, and then it can be anthemic with orchestras and bands. And we've been fortunate to perform together all over the world and do albums. And I think hopefully when we can get back in the studio, you know, there'll be a new album on
Good. Well, that's the thought. You can, if you search for Kerry, there is a lot of the stuff with Brian is out there. You can download it. It's some beautiful stuff, and of course, Toby's so many of Toby's shows like Matilda, the original cast album. Toby's on that, and numerous others. So you've got many opportunities to listen to the work of my guests. I'm immensely grateful to both of you, to Kerry Ellis and to Toby Coles. Thank you very much for joining us. Next week, we're going to be talking to Harriet Thorpe and to Janie D. So,
lovely.
I know that's gonna be riotous. Can you imagine those two in the same room together? It's gonna be absolutely mad.
Also done Wicked. Harriet obviously has done Wicked as well.
Yeah, she has. Yeah, well, there is. I mean, it is amazing. I mean, we didn't get to talk about you doing Cats, but you've also done Cats. And one of the little girls said, "How many shows have Kerry and Toby done?" And it was like, I can't go there because that's going to be a whole hour just you listing off so many shows you've done. But I'm conscious of time, so we have to end. But thank you very much to you both, and join us again next week. Bye-bye now.